Every morning, more than 2 billion cups of coffee are brewed around the globe. But behind every sip lies a vast web of farmers, traders, and political forces. At its center stands one country, Brazil, the world's coffee superpower. Coffee isn't just Brazil's crop, it's its heartbeat, its history, its export crown. Brazil accounts for more than 37% of global coffee exports, nearly 40 million 60-kilogram bags each year. Arabica thrives in Minas Gerais, while Robusta dominates Espírito Santo. Together, they make Brazil both the largest producer and exporter on earth. Coffee provides income for over 8 million Brazilians and shapes entire regions.
Here, we can see how Brazil's coffee production has evolved from 1960 all the way to today.
Over the decades, the country's output has risen steadily from around 20,000 to nearly 65,000 60-kilogram bags in 2023. What makes Brazil unique is the diversity of its coffee.
The smoother, high-quality Arabica beans, shown in blue, dominate with over 42,000 bags, while the more robust, high-volume Robusta variety adds more than 22,000.
In the 1990s, coffee farming symbolized national prosperity in Brazil. You can see one of the plantation owners walks through the rows of coffee trees happily. Plantation owners managed vast estates, production was stable, and exports grew each year, especially to United States. The air smells of freshly picked cherries, workers laugh, the sun shines, and the business thrives. Families built businesses that lasted for generations.
This next graph tracks Brazil's coffee exports. From 1960 onward, exports rose dramatically, reaching over 45,000 60-kilogram bags in 2023. Most of this, shown in blue, comes from green bean exports. Smaller but growing lines at the bottom show soluble coffee and roasted and ground coffee, proving Brazil's strength across the entire coffee spectrum, from bulk trade to specialty markets.
Consumers are happy to buy a fresh imported Brazilian coffee for an affordable price.
New tariffs from President Trump are increasing tensions with two U.S. trade partners. As of today, 50% tariffs are officially in effect for Brazil. New levies are expected to increase prices on goods like coffee and beef.
Reaction was immediate.
A small decline appears.
That's when US tariffs on Brazilian coffee took effect, reducing export demand and forcing some producers to cut back.
We can see the change not only in the fields, but on the farmer's face. The grandchild walks through the same rows his grandfather once tended, but now the pride has faded into quiet worrying. The disappointment is clear in his eyes, a reflection of years of uncertainty. By 2025, the lines dip slightly. That's the impact of US tariffs, which slowed shipments to a major beer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jack Belcher, and I'm an economics student at Northern Michigan University. To start, I want to discuss the coffee culture of the United States. The United States is the biggest consumer of coffee in the world in terms of amount of coffee they're drinking, in terms of billions of cups. And we've kind of got this internalized culture in America where when you're in a hurry in the mornings, you want to grab a coffee to go from Starbucks or another chain to get you through your morning. Maybe you get another one during the afternoon. But coffee is a really important part, especially for us as college students, to get through our day. We use the caffeine to help us function, and we often make really extravagant lattes or frappes to help with the taste. So coffee is very much ingrained in American culture. What you see here is how we get that coffee. This graph right here is showing the 2024 exports of coffee to the United States, broken down by country. So you can see that Brazil is the largest exporter of coffee to the United States, with Colombia coming in second, Switzerland in third, then Canada, Guatemala, Honduras, and Peru. And you can see that Brazil and Colombia dominate kind of the lion's share of coffee exports to the United States in 2020. In this graph, you can kind of see in a more visual form just how much coffee Americans drink. One coffee cup in this image, like for each year, is 1 billion cups of coffee that Americans drink yearly. So as you can see, we drink well over 150 billion cups of coffee per year, which in a country of 300 million people is pretty crazy. It puts us in like the top 50 in the world for per capita. But again, with the amount of total cups, we consume the most coffee in the world. We have this very ingrained culture of get your coffee to go from Starbucks in the morning, like I mentioned earlier. And it's also really important to note that the United States is unable to produce enough coffee. Like we said, it's over 179 billion cups of coffee in the last couple of years. And so the US itself only produced 4.2 million pounds of coffee in 2024. So the US is very heavily reliant on these exports from Brazil, from Colombia, and from Switzerland, because 4.2 million pounds per coffee is not even close to enough to get the 179 or more billion cups of coffee that we need. It can only really be grown in Hawaii and in very limited quantities. So US has this very ingrained coffee culture, and it's very reliant upon exporters to make that coffee culture happen.
Hi, my name is Zach. I'm an econ student here at NMU, and today I'm going to be covering the Brazilian coffee market's effect pre and post tariff. As you can see in the graphic below us, we can see in the green line, we have the pre-tariff supply and demand for the coffee market in Brazil. And the blue lines, we can see the post-tariff supply and demand for Brazil. Obviously, with the United States imposing these tariffs, we see a fall in the aggregate demand for the coffee market, resulting in a price falling. And from this point, we're going to look and see what the effects are on small other markets like China. So if the tariffs persist, we will reach this as a long-term equilibrium. The global price of coffee will fall, as I mentioned before, and that will induce a quantity demanded increase in a market such as China and possibly induce a shortage. In the long run, supply could correct for this, but at a lower price still. However, if tariffs are eliminated, demand will go back to its pre-tariff point in the US and for the rest of the coffee market aggregate for Brazil. However, China is continuing to increase its demand over time, as we've seen in other data places. And the Brazilian coffee would probably be at a higher price, even though the tariffs would be eliminated. What does this mean for the coffee culture in these parts of the world? American coffee culture, if the tariffs persist, probably would substitute into other caffeinated beverages, such as energy drinks or anything else that the Americans still have today, but less coffee. In China, again, the quantity demand increase, as long as the increase in demand itself would induce a long-standing coffee culture competitively, possibly with the tea culture. In Armenia, due to the lower price, due to these tariffs, it's possible that they could import more coffee from Brazil rather than Indonesia or their other exporters. And in Brazil, there would probably be fewer jobs due to the large amount of the GDP being the coffee market. And as a result, since demand decreases, more firms are going to leave production, resulting in possibly smaller jobs.